Our most recent patch brought amongst various tokens and distractions a rework to few arms traits, which ended up being direct buff to builds utilizing said trait line. Both of them. Does that change anything of substance though? For the past months, Warriors meta builds lived and died on the leeway of defensive utility. That's why Spellbreaker, as the only warrior spec with defense in its mechanic, seems omnipresent in versus modes, and why Bladesworn raised into popularity after Unshakable Mountain buff and came crushing down back after it was nerfed to the size. Without instant cap closes, invisibility, and bullshit the likes of Distortion, Warrior has to either become incredibly hard to kill or just kill his target faster than the target can kill him. Both are easier said than done, considering Warrior's defense options are either animation locked or flawed in one or the other way. Stance Warrior might have a lot of strike damage immunity, but can still fall to condition pressure. Hammer Warrior needs to stop his opponent from playing the game completely to have a chance at staying alive until the end of the fight, and Bladesworn was literally nerfed out of the game. On the other side of the coin, Glass Cannon Warrior builds can certainly blow people into Kingdom Come, but putting a Glass Cannon with a metric fuckload of damage against another Glass Cannon with similar damage output, but also invisibility, animation-free blocks, on-demand invulnerability, projectile reflect, or most often combination of several from this list, just appear to very slightly favor one of the sides in the race to empty opposing side's health bar. Because Warrior doesn't have all these extras, his only way of succeeding is blasting everyone and everything into Grenth's welcoming embrace before he sat there himself, and new changes were supposed to help to some extent with that very task. Not so much the crit supplement on Bloodlust, as that requires the opponent to be bleeding in the first place. And as you can probably figure out yourself, a build without innate bleeding application isn't really going to benefit from something that has a percentage chance to activate based off of something else that has a percentage chance to activate. That said, with the sheer number of strikes we barrage our enemies with, the chance for bleeding to be applied is pretty high. But the chance that it gets applied on the hit that books a date with Doom's Scythe for our target is equally as high. Neither the change to Furious Burst was a big plus, as ArenaNet, in their absolute brilliance, forgot to push the cooldown change this trait was supposed to get on November 28th, alongside the update to its function. They remembered to make it activate on weapon swap and to reduce boon's duration, but not to reduce the cooldown, effectively nerfing the trait not just into the ground, but straight into the basement below Ascalonian catacombs. This is either an oversight or straight up negligence. I'm going to give devs benefit of the doubt and assume this is an accident rather than disdain towards Warrior's general player base, but for the love of Hydrated One, it's getting harder to believe every following patch. A light at the end of the tunnel here that, contrary to my expectations, wasn't a train barreling towards me is the burst precision, which I had very little hope for and had my expectations positively subverted. Wording of trait doesn't explicitly state this, but the effect of the trait applies to the burst skill that activates the trait, effectively carrying over its previous functionality, while also granting extra ferocity and lingering for 2 to 4 seconds after the deed is done, so any follow-up you have will at least partially benefit from guaranteed crits and extra ferocity. This is a bonus for build diversity, letting power builds to be more consistent, condition builds to actually benefit from crit, and hybrid builds to exist by a proxy. Unfortunately, this isn't a second coming of Christ, nor anything of the magnitude that us Warrior enjoyers hoped for. Arms is still relatively scuffed and falls into the trap of having zero utility that isn't straight damage increase. I'd like to be optimistic, but with Furious Burst getting accidentally deleted, Bloodlust being completely random with 10 weapons from Warrior's current arsenal, and all past criticism still applying all but one to arms as a whole, we land much closer to square one than we aimed for. This was supposed to be a leap ahead, but instead we leapt like a cat from slippery surface. so little of substance effectively changed, I'm genuinely convinced no one would have noticed something was patched if they didn't outright told us what they pushed through. Or what they failed to push through. This very patch, one class got entire Pokédex adjusted, other got an entire trait line reworked on top of weapon buffs, another got a weapon reworked, and meanwhile, Warrior, the class most desperate for a rework, got buffs to a heal build that isn't out yet, a gimmick trait that no one is going to use anyway, one trait botched, one elite spec butchered, and cooldown reduced on the least reliable skill in the game so you can miss it even more often. I don't want to be overly negative, nor overly critical, but with the fundamental issues with Warrior's design remaining unaddressed while 8 other classes get continuously improved over the years, the feeling of being left in the dust settles and starts to already make itself a home. Arena, a trait line without any built-in sustain or defenses, will always be hard to justify for a class that depends on its traits and utilities to supply sustain and defenses. You made a melee-focused class with second worst mobility in the game, whose only built-in defense is being able to face tank one more crit before going down, and you're surprised that 100% offensive builds with no utility are missing the mark. You'll either have to rework Warrior or start putting sustain and defenses in all trait lines you want to see played in versus modes. Because in current patch, Warrior either plays a defense Spellbreaker, a defense Condi Berserker, or auto-loses to every class in the game that's being played correctly. I don't know how you'd like to refer to this, but I call that an issue. And because of this issue, every update to Warrior's offense-oriented tools is going to bloody flop. Crabface out.